Call this planning section to order. Please join me for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call for the work session on July 16th, 2024. Mayor Lindsay,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Howell,
Here.
Councilman Humbert,
Here.
Councilman Weeks,
Here.
Councilman Crane.
Here.
We have a quorum. You may proceed.
At this time, I ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Moving on to item A, discussion on chapter 3, lodgers tax. I'll turn this over to Manager Weir. We also have our lodgers tax chairman, Owen Curry, in attendance.
So, I have some things, I'll have some more. So basically, when we, came on board, we saw that the lodgers tax, actually the short-term rental ordinance had been, the short-term rental ordinance, which we started looking into implementing. And I want to say, Mayor Pro Tem, you might remember better than me, but I want to say it was 2016,
That's,
16 or 17.
that's probably correct.
And one never got implemented. So, realizing that, I had asked the, chairman of the Lodgers Tax Committee, to pick that all up and to run with it. And so that we could try and develop something, because right now, even though legally we're able to, even though we're legally able to bill for lodgers tax, we actually have challenges in how we monitor that billing. So right now, we can say if you do lodgers tax, you owe us 5% for lodgers tax and 2.4% for sports and rec fees. But we have no regulation over that process, other than to say you owe it to us if you perform short-term rentals or nightly rentals. And so the intent was, in almost every municipality in the state and every county in the state has developed short-term rental ordinances to allow them to regulate the short-term rental industry. And as we all know, it's a huge revenue generator. Last year, we were in excess of $1 million. This year, I think it's gonna be even bigger based on just the way we ended our fourth quarter of last year. If we proceed on that pace, we could easily bring in $1.5 million next year in short-term rental revenue.
Lodgers tax.
I'm sorry, well, it's lodgers tax, but yeah. So lodgers tax revenue. The issue is that there's a lot of complications with this, beyond just taxing and collecting the revenue. There are certain types of liabilities, that we have, because we are charging this. And in addition, we're not sure, we have no way to regulate that everybody is actually paying. So one of the things we did is we purchased a software program that allows us to identify people who are advertising online through VRBO or the other vendors, that there have short-term rentals to rent. And it actually will go out there and see. Now, if people are doing this not online, if they're doing it through a private entity or themselves, we don't have any way of identifying them. But if they're doing it online, we have a software application that's been purchased. It's near rolling out. We're pretty close. I think it'll probably be rolled out in August. And that's gonna tell us who is and isn't actually paying lodger's tax. Because we can see that they advertise, we can see that they took a date off their calendar, which we're gonna assume means that they rented it. And then we can see if they paid, and if they didn't pay, then we're gonna be suspect. But right now, if we identified that, we don't have anything, there's no way, there's nothing we can do about it other than say, hey, you need to pay your lodger's tax. Or there's very little that we can do. So that's why we decided we needed some sort of regulation. That number one, we could go and we could make people and make sure that people are actually paying their fair share of lodger's tax. Now, one way to do that is through licensure. So you can actually go in and license people for this type of business, and we have the authority to establish that licensure within our jurisdiction. But with that licensure, then there again, like I said, there comes liability. So if we license somebody to do something and we don't, to some degree, regulate what they're doing, and then a tragedy happens, that liability could come back on the village. They could say, somebody could sue us and say, well, you license these people to do it and they put us up overnight, in something that wasn't safe. So if we're gonna license people for lodger's tax, there needs to be supporting, supporting ordinances and so on that allow the village to then assure that the licensed facilities are in fact safe for people to stay in. And by doing that, we don't eliminate our liability, but we do minimize it. And it will prevent us in some cases from certain types of liability, especially through the licensure process when you put the ownership of compliance back on the property owner. And so, there's a big discussion here, and that's why we're bringing it to the council. And I'm not looking for any answers tonight. This is an education process, because I'm gonna ask y'all to do a lot of homework. And I didn't have time to get all of these samples, but I'll be sending out examples of the ordinances for Ruidoso, for Vail, for Red River, and then Colfax County. Because they all have ordinances that one way or another deal with this. And we can use those as examples so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. But I will tell you, in 2019, the village actually developed what I'm asking you guys to develop. It was already basically had gone through committees, had gone to council, had gone to legal counsel, was written up and ready to propose to council for final approval to begin the ordinance process. We had a new administration, and the new administration did not proceed, chose not to proceed with that work. And I have that work. I'm sorry, right now it's because it was kind of last minute. I have it here and I will get it to you, copies of all of this. But what was proposed and what I did hand you is what came out of the Lodgers Tax Committee. And I want to thank the Lodgers Tax Committee. I know they put time in. There's a lot of considerations on this. There's two sides of the story. My job as village manager is to protect the village. But at the same time, this is big business for us. This is, to some extent, the lifeblood of our village. Or it's become that. And so we want to be safe, we want to make sure that we do things the right way, but at the same time, we don't want to kill an industry. Especially not one this important, and that's the balancing act that the council has to do. Because I will tell you, you know, from my perspective, there are items that I think that what the Lodgers Tax Committee came back with, I think it needs more. I don't think it has quite enough to provide the level of protection that is needed by the village. But on the other hand, I fully realize we don't want to go too far over either because we don't want to damage this industry, and that is the battle. And so what I mainly want to do is provide you guys and know that this is coming. I want to get this done. My goal is to have it done by the 1st of July. We're probably 2 months behind schedule. But I would like to see this wrapped up by the council within the next 2 months. Where we actually have an ordinance that's going to be in place, that's going to be enforceable. And to be frank, we need that ordinance. Otherwise, all the money that we spent on the software program. I mean, like I said, we can send letters out that say, hey, you're not paying your lodger's tax, but we don't have any teeth behind that to really do much about it. And that's why we need the short-term rental ordinance. I will say one thing, one direction that the Lodgers Tax Committee took was they included this in the actual Lodgers Tax Ordinance, which is we refer to as Title III. Again, that was not the approach that most municipalities taken. I don't know if there's others that have done that. There may be. I don't know everybody's ordinances. But all the municipalities I looked at, they had a separate short-term rental ordinance, separate from lodger's tax. But what you need in the lodger's tax is simply recognition of the short-term rental. And this is what we did in 2019, is we actually came to or prepared for council 3 documents. One was an ordinance for short-term rentals. One was update to the lodger's tax, which recognized it. So basically the lodger's tax said the authority to enforce lodger's tax collections comes from Title VIII, which is included in Title VIII is the short-term rental ordinance. So lodger's tax ordinance acknowledged the authority of Title VIII, which is a short-term rental ordinance. And then the fees were all placed in resolution. I do not like putting fees into ordinance because it takes so much to change an ordinance. And if you put fees in resolution, it's a lot easier to change a resolution. And that's what was done. And I'll have that handed out. This is the resolution. This is the lodger's tax. So you got the resolution. Yeah, this is the lodger's tax here. Let me hand it. This is the resolution. That specifies the rates, the fees. And then, they do. And then this is the short-term rental ordinance that amends Title VIII. And the other thing that by putting this in Title VIII, it allows our code enforcement officer then to act on behalf of the village to enforce the short-term rental ordinance. So basically what I wanted to do in this meeting was to introduce this to the council, to kind of update you on where we are, to give you material that you can utilize to make sure you know and understand, and if you have questions, you can come to us with questions. I know I'm ready to work with you and answer any questions. I believe that Chairman Curry is willing to do that as well. So we need to start thinking about this, and I'm ready to answer questions now. Like I say, I just didn't have time to pull it together, but I do have several other ordinances I can email you that you can use as reference. But the thing that to me, the short-term rental ordinance has to talk about enforcement. It has to talk about what the rules are. In order to have a short-term rental, there's certain safety precautions you have to have, like fire extinguishers and so on. There's things that should be considered, like parking, because if we don't have any regulation related to that, it becomes hard to enforce. And then our full-time residents may have issues with the way our short-term rental people are parking, and it may affect them, and we want to be able to deal with those types of scenarios. So it's really mainly about public safety in general, both the public safety of our full-time residents that are indirectly involved in short-term rental, and the public safety of our guests who are here living in short-term rental facilities. And what I'm hoping that we can do is come to some level of consensus on this, but I didn't want to wait until, I wanted to start this now so that in a month or 2 months, whenever we're ready and everything goes through legal. And plus, I would like direction from the council on, and I would appreciate if you guys do some research and you want to come sit down with me and give me your opinions. I can accumulate them and try and build this into something that the council will eventually approve. It's not gonna be perfect. It's not gonna be, not everybody's gonna be happy no matter what we come up with. This is just reality. It's not gonna be. But I hope that we can get a consensus so that the council will be in agreement when we put this ordinance in place that, you know, this is a good, that this short-term rental ordinance ends up being a good compromise between all the parties involved and something that is gonna be enforceable and, you know, not prevent you guys from getting reelected.
So, Mr. Manager, I guess there's at least a couple major things.
Okay,
One, how do we arrive at the final format of what all the possibilities we have? And then obviously, secondly, what that format says. So will we have another work session to get down into the nitty gritty? And
I anticipate another work session before I bring the ordinance to you. This was the intent here was introductory to let you guys know who we are and what we're trying to accomplish. And so that I can start collecting input from you. I think once we get through that process, I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. Then we can have another work session where we can really dig in and come up with different ideas. And then from that, I think I'll try and formulate an actual final document that we'll have to take to legal counsel before I bring to you.
thank you.
But
I was gonna say, in response to Mayor Pro Tem Howe, yes, we're definitely gonna need at least one more work session. I'm gonna ask, and I do appreciate the Lodgers Tax Committee for presenting this to us and working on this, as we all know, it's very important that we get this put together and implemented as soon as possible, but we want to do it right. I don't want to get into the weeds of the requirements. Obviously, there's going to be some necessary safety, public safety issues, inspections, and those sort of things. Some of the things that I wanted to discuss today, though, were the fees. And if you look at the resolution from 2019, they have a first-time application fee, which they passed, $450. an annual renewal fee of $450. And then that's in addition to your business registration fee, fire inspection and administrative costs. No, I'm sorry, that's what they include. The Lodgers Tax Committee has then sent this revised ordinance, which there's just a one-time $35 fee, which is what the businesses are currently paying now, any business pays, and a $50 fire inspection fee. To me, those fees are absolutely too low for several reasons. Number one, the administrative costs involved in the inspections and so forth far exceeds $50. Number two, I feel like the short-term rental market is solely responsible for our workforce housing crisis. I think that's a good thing. It's an unintended consequence. I also don't feel like the 2019 resolution of $450 flat fee per property is the right way to go about it, because I don't think that someone with a one-bedroom condo should be paying the same as somebody with a 10-room lodge. So I think that I would really ask that the Lodgers Tax Committee go back and look at the fee schedules. Also, when it comes to inspections, we do have a code enforcement officer now on board. We do have a fire inspector with the fire station. But once we implement this, we're gonna get inundated with inspections. And I wanna look at the possibility, and I haven't gotten too far into it, but looking into like if there's a private home inspector, so like the same type of home inspector when you sell a property that would come inspect, if they had a list of 10, 12, 15 things that they need to verify, and the owner provides us with an inspection from a licensed home inspector telling us that it meets these requirements, then they're eligible for their permit. These are the type of things I would ask the Lodgers Tax Committee to look at.
So is it possible, depending on how we do these individual items, each one of those takes the time of a village staff person? Is it possible to use Lodgers tax money to reimburse the village for that effort?
It should,
It is.
based on what I've read in the statute.
One of the things that, and this is off my memory, but one of the things that is included in allowable expenditures in the Lodgers tax statute is enforcement.
And administrative.
I don't know that it
Administrative.
uses that exact word.
Administrative fees, I think, is more what I would say after just having read it.
So I will say. The village is far healthier now than it was 5 years ago.
True.
And in 2019, we didn't have things working as well as they are now,
Financially helpful.
financially.
Yes.
So a lot of what was decided back then was based on a different set of facts than what we're looking at today. So obviously, if we need to change this, then.
Manager.
Mayor Pro Tem, you're exactly right, but I do want to, where we are is in unusual territory. It really stems, our financial status right now stems from, I hate to say this, but 4 years of very little action and a lot of open positions. If we fully staff, we're not gonna have $3 million left over in revenue like we did in 2023. 2023, they spent $3 million less than they brought in revenue. And it's just, I think we have money now and we're gonna spend it on things like roads and infrastructure that needs to be done. That money's gonna go pretty quick. My guess is 3 to 4 years. And we may find ourselves back in that situation like almost every municipality in New Mexico where they're eating what they kill, if you know what I mean. which is where we were for 20 years.
So all I'm saying is, we have additional facts to consider.
True, very true.
And the other one too is the compliance inspection. Is that is that fire inspection part of the compliance inspection?
The one that we modified the current ordinance is a part of it.
So, that's biannual and not every year, so those fees, as far as that goes.
Right, well, the inspection
Maybe.
required every 2 years.
Yeah, every 2 years instead of every year.
Right,
You
and
would, you would have maybe a reduction there as far as. Or, I don't mean
Well,
reduction, I
basically-
shouldn't have said that, I actually meant that I think this is an annual renewal fee. And the inspections are probably biannual, so maybe.
and that's what it
that.
includes, so yeah, you're right,
That's all.
based on this model.
Yeah,
Based on this model. No, but again, what the Lodgers Tax Committee proposed before us now is a $35 fee, which is the same as a business registration fee and a $50 fire inspection. I mean, that's the harder part I have, only because I did run on workforce housing. As you know, we've just increased building permits from $150 to $1,000. With 400 of that going to the workforce housing fund. I don't think construction has as big of impact on long-term rentals as the short-term rental market. I also don't, and you can argue, that the short-term rentals are the biggest impact on our, a big impact, not the biggest, a big impact on our roads, solid waste, and so on. Again, if these houses have residents full-time like most major, like most villages, again, we're in a unique situation. But I do want to reiterate, looking for a fee structure that I think would be fair, not only to the property owner that's wanting to rent their vacation home, but also to help compensate for the impact it has on the community. I always wanted to look at whether it was bedrooms, number of guests, something, square footage of the property, to have some kind of sliding fee structure that's fair towards the size of the property. So, I mean, my latest proposal would be $50 per person that you advertise that the property's sleeping. So if it's an efficiency condo where it advertises for 2 people, it's $100 a year. But if it's a 10-room that sleeps 30, you're looking at 1,500. I mean,
or like the registration.
for an annual, your
For the
annual permit
registration permit fee.
fee. Mhm.
Now, if I understood you correctly, you're throwing out the idea of a portion of these fees would be designated to workforce housing.
Correct, so once we establish that fee structure, then yes,
Okay,
I want the majority of this fee to go to the workforce housing fund. I think we need to cover our administrative costs, but Mayor Pro Tem House point, that could be covered out of the lodgers tax fund independently, and the whole thing could go to the workforce housing fund. I mean, I'm willing to look at anything to that, but I really do want to support the workforce housing in any way that we can, because I truly believe that we're not gonna have any advancement in this village. In our village services and our public business services until we address that issue.
Well, if I'm a homeowner renting, I would feel better knowing that my money's going to something specific rather than just in a general fund.
And I can say from personal experience, because I will say, my company, we have a small property management division. And we've talked to all of our owners, and every single one of them, if the goal of that is to workforce housing to enhance the visitors' experience and their experience when they're here. More restaurants, better service at restaurants, better staff at local businesses, things being open, things happening, they're all for it. I haven't had one, but again, ours is a small sampling.
Can I interject something or?
Sorry,
I mean, the only thing I would
if
say
you,
is.
if you would just come up, Owen,
Oh,
please.
Owen Curry, Rogers Tax Chairman. A lot of these models, like when we're looking at a The original one that was proposed in 19 was based off Taos. It's pretty similar to Santa Fe. Those two locations are, they don't want really short-term rentals and so
Their
they.
goal was to
To limit
squelch
it.
the short-term. rental
And
market.
so, and then, like your fee model is something that's more of a Colorado-based situation. Which I understand, but like a Colorado vacation home might rent 250 nights a year. Whereas the average Angel Fire one might be 100 nights a year at probably half the amount per night, ADR. So if you're gonna look at a sliding scale like that, I would definitely look to scale it down more. I know that, you know, I would be fine if, you know, if 100% of the money on that fee went to workforce housing, that would be great. I mean, people buy homes here not to rent them long term. People buy homes here to come to Angel Fire and enjoy the weather, and when they're not here, try to defray the cost of ownership by renting it out short term. And they built those models and bought those homes off of certain financial projections. And if we alter those projections by restrictions and by overfeeing, that, you know, you're gonna affect this area real estate wise, restaurants, a lot of different aspects. It's just not gonna be short-term rentals that are gonna be affected, because the people that come into those short-term rentals eat the dinners and lunches, they ski, they, you know, they do all the things that bring in the GRT for our community. So when we're looking at that, we need to look beyond just those things. Now, in this, what we did, I did, and our committee did, is redline the current ordinance, and there's been a penalty and up to a year in jail. It's a misdemeanor if you don't pay it. It's 10% penalty above what you didn't pay. We've just never enforced it. And so what I don't want is another ordinance that really penalizes the people that follow the rules, and the people that don't follow the rules just keep on doing it. And they'll get, and nothing happens to them.
Mr. Mayor, may I interject? Chairman Curry is exactly correct that that is in there. But the reason why we don't enforcement is because we have no way to determine. So right now, we can say, hey, you're advertising your place, but we don't have any way of knowing what that dollar amount is, and it's a percentage of that dollar amount. So if we went to court, we would lose unless we could prove how much they collected. And the cost of doing that would be excessive. You would have to have subpoenas of personal bank records and all kinds of things. So even though, yes, there is something out there that you know, says penalties of this amount or whatever. The problem with it was there's no way to know what that dollar amount is, and we would have to prove it in order to enforce that penalty.
Yeah, and that, you know, we have the software the village has made an acquisition of. It's more of a company, I guess, that does it for you. The village will have a portal where they'll be able to look at all the identified properties, and like Manager Weir said, one thing it'll do is it'll show, like, if that day disappears from the calendar, it remembers what the price was for that day. So it's gonna be able to give an exact amount, but that could be enforced now with the current ordinance. It wouldn't even need a new ordinance to enforce, because we already have the enforcement, we just didn't have the method to figure the back office amounts. But we can do that just with the way the ordinance is now. I would suggest something, I always wanted something a little more penalizing than what our current ordinance said. We didn't make an alteration to that. We prefer for people just to play by the rules and pay their fair share of the amount, but you know, it's not happening now. Even the people that pay lodgers tax now aren't paying what the sports facility they should be paying. If you can look at, I mean, that one's pretty obvious, just because you can look at 5%. Well, this should be 48% of this. And it's about 28%. So, you know, we have people who are paying no taxes, GRT, lodgers, sports facility. Then we have the people who are paying GRT and lodgers, and then we have the people who are paying all three. And, you know, I think the enforcement of that, and then taking the basic things that make property safe, smoke detectors, CO detectors, fire extinguishers, making sure there's a second egress to every sleeping area. You know, making sure there's an emergency numbers posted on the door. Those are the things that are gonna be 99% of the things that are gonna keep people safe in our community. And those are things that we can do simply without materially affecting short-term rentals.
Yeah, I agree with, the water tax, Chairman. The last thing we wanna do is stifle the rental market because it is such a large part of our economy. Other than just ensuring our guest safety. Would you suggest, is there a fee structure then? I mean, you feel, so you're telling me though that. If we were to go forward with $50 per person that advertises, so for instance, in your, I mean, you probably have anything that sleeps 2 to 20. So on something that sleeps 20 people. Give me an average nightly rental, not peak Christmas, not some peak summer, not peak winter. I mean, what's that home gonna rent for?
Well, that particular home's probably averages 480.
480 a night. And so $1,000 fee would just crush that market.
I mean, if you, an average home here rents between 80 and 120 a nights. Mainly, the main factor is owner usage, you know, and if the owners come in at Christmas, New Year's, President's Day.
Sure.
So I mean, it's all a different thing, but you're taking something that may end up being 3 to 5% of their net income. Is being charged in a fee now. So I'm not necessarily opposed. I think your idea of a sliding scale is a great concept. I think that the dollar amount seems a little high for Angel Fire.
Well, and I wanna make sure too, that we do something, if we're gonna do it, that it's substantial enough to do something with.
Mhm.
And that we can also have those projections to borrow against for larger projects, so that we're not just doing one-off. Tiny home construction, we can actually put a subdivision there, and quite frankly, we would much rather see private enterprise come in and take care of this issue, but they're just not. We're not gonna be able to where we can rent the units to the workforce. I would say to your point of just leveling the playing field and making sure that everybody's paying the GRT, the lodgers tax and the sports facility tax. If we're doing this, everybody's gonna pay that same sliding scale, and I think the market would then tend to adjust to make sure that all the owners still capture that 3 to 5% that they're having to lose toward the fee would be my thinking. Again, it's not gonna be selective enforcement. We wanna make this broad. So I just, again, that was my biggest issue with what the lodge tax has proposed. Everything else that you brought forth, totally, on the same page.
And if I had known that I was supposed to be working on 3 different ordinances, I would have
Right,
broken it out. I was just we modified the current one to kind of represent that. So I mean, I'm sure it could be partialed out to create 3 different type things, but we just kind of did it to this so that it addressed the issues.
and again, and to manager, we're gonna have a discussion as to what title some of these different ordinances need to be. Some of it's title 9, some of it's title 3, title 8.
If I could interject, I like the idea of the sliding scale. I think the same is true for the fire inspections. Whoever ends up in that home doing inspections, if they're checking 1 smoke detector versus 12. Maybe the idea of almost like the dispensable space ordinance that's getting worked on as well. Year 1, we're really looking for compliance. You know, this is gonna be a new process for us. It's gonna be code enforcement, it's gonna be fire inspections. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the way this would be done, if we pass this, we could always adjust the fee schedules via resolution as we do everything else.
That's the goal, yeah.
So what if for, the first year, first 2 years, because timing is what's critical here. We'd really like to get this thing passed to give us time to complete all these inspections before ski season. So what if, you know, the $50 a bedroom is kind of the end goal, again, to.
Well, I was suggesting $50 per person, but
Right,
maybe it's $50 per bedroom. I mean, there could be any,
Some-
any number of metric that's deemed reliable,
Yep.
consistent, and fair.
so it can be applied to all the different sizes and types of rentals. What if for the first year or two, while we build out all the processes this is gonna take, we looked at a 10 per or a 20 per or and then come back in and change it? Because I think you're both right, you know, we are headed towards the Colorado model. We may not be there yet, but in a couple of years of showing that the short-term ordinance works, the inspections are working, the fees are being properly collected, the sports tax. In other words, we have a process that's working at a less than 50% compliance rate right now, and we really want to get it to that 80-90% compliance. So how do we kind of shove this in there with the bones of it being what we want, and we kind of tweak it as we get better at it year to year?
I mean, that's fair to have it. I mean, again, with it being a resolution, not an ordinance as far as the fee structure,
Right.
we can tweak it. If it is crippling the market, we can dial it back.
Right.
If we're not attaining the goals that we need to. Press forward. So I would just ask, that's what I think even the fact that it was stricken, the numbers were stricken and brought down. I personally just don't feel like the business registration fee of $35 and the fire inspection fee of $50 is realistic.
And that was just, honestly, that was just based off of our. I don't know how many far back fire chiefs. What they kind of gave me as a number, you know, it's a little bit dependent. I mean, on a home, it's different than going and inspecting a restaurant. You know, I mean, it's gonna take a lot more time, a lot more technical equipment, a lot more things. I mean, if you're really looking for smoke detectors, CO detectors, fire extinguishers, that the grill is away, there's second point of egress, the big things that are safety issues. I just don't think it would take that long. Somebody could knock them out at 50, you know, somebody could do 6 or 8 of them a day at $50 an hour. I thought it would be covering the cost of the fire person's time. I'm certainly, it's code enforcement, and certainly leave that language more vague would be so that, you know, the municipality could make the decision on what agency or department is going to be handling inspections. I mean, I don't want more restrictions or inspections or anything on myself. I just want people with the things that I named, we already do in my company. I mean, it's not, they would all pass if the guy went and looked at them today. I'm worried about the ones I go look at that people ask me to manage, that I tell them, no, there's no way I can't manage this. And that's the things that I would prefer the village stop those people from renting.
I agree. It's just enforcement across the board.
Well, again, too, if the inspections are biannual, that fee's gonna come down anyway.
I think I've spent a lot more time with the Riados ordinance.
I mean,
It's quite a bit more mature. Ruidoso collects almost $3 million annually. There's a lot of things in there I'd love to see us get to where you can't get a short-term rental permit if you haven't complied with their defensible space ordinance. You can't get a short-term rental permit if you have any active code violations. I think these are all great ideas. I guess I'm just suggesting we get to the baby steps of having an actual process and figuring out where it's gonna break in 6 months or 16 months or whatever it is. But in my mind, what Riados is doing is kind of what we're aiming at, that $3 million collected, integrating it with code enforcement and the fire, that holistic. And I'm not, please don't take anything that you guys have worked on here as an aside, but obviously they have a multi-year track record of their ordinances work.
Well, and we use Riadosa.
Sure.
And frankly, Red River used Riadosa
Yep.
to create theirs, and so we're kind of modeling it, in large part, a lot of this is taken right from Riadosa.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you on that aspect, that I think they're a good model. I also agree that, you know, the timing of this is really, we want to get something basic passed so that we have 3 months of shoulder season to get everybody in compliance. Because if we wait and get it done December 1st,
Right. There's not a whole other
it's
season.
gonna happen, it's gonna wait till spring at that point, and you know, but if we try to complicate it and make it something that is gonna be difficult for the community to absorb, then I think you're gonna end up, it's gonna be delayed once again. Like we talked about, down the line.
I agree. The only spot I'd quibble with you is, having done inspections for architectural committee, getting 8 inspections when one's on Halo Pines and one's on Bright, you might get 5 done in an afternoon. And that's all you're gonna do.
You sound like one of my home inspectors.
Yeah.
It's always wondering why they take so long.
You sound like Kit
Cause it's
Carson
30 minutes from that ridge to that ridge in my Jeep.
trying to, it's like, sound like Kit Carson trying to tell Kurt where to hook up fiber optic. Bouncing all around.
I would ask that, you know, myself and any committee members you would like to be involved in the changes that you're talking about making, just because we're a large number of stakeholders in the process, and I think it's important to have input from people who are actually gonna be affected by it.
I would recommend, and this is just throwing it out there, but as far as the inspections with inspecting fire pit compliance fee, something that would be good as.
So that is in the Rio Dos ordinance, and again, I'm not picking on you. If we wholesale pass the Rio Dos ordinance, we couldn't, because there's some stuff in there that we just can't physically do yet. But it addresses barbecues and outdoor fire pits and all of those things in there, because they, I'm sure when they wrote it, gave their forestry department a hand in saying, what do you guys care about? Well, we don't have a forestry department yet. We're hoping to get there. But yeah, fire pits, it's all, my big one, and I've been getting worn out by neighbors over the 4th of July weekend, is parking.
Yeah.
I got a couple of homes across the street from me that have the downhill 2 parking spots only. And my neighbor is blowing up my cell phone with text messages because I got 4 trucks and trailers full of side-by-sides parked down the street.
It's just as a counselor, he's.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's like, oh, I know somebody that can help me find the right person for this, so. All of those things.
And our police department gave me a ticket for parking.
That's because you're playing poker. That's So, Mr. Mayor, if I might just kind of wrap up, this is, again, I wanted to start the process of education. I do hope to have this, some final product, no later than the first meeting in September to council. I'd like to do it quicker than that, because we are gonna, just like Chairman Curry said, it's, once this gets passed, even when we make it through all the ordinance process, it's gonna take us 2 to 3 months to get things fully implemented and policies and procedures in place. And I mean, it could happen quicker, but
Never does.
I don't wanna set an false expectation, because with the staff we have, we got a lot of things going on. And, you know, I do wanna have this in place well before people start coming here for, Christmas.
Well, because we estimated we're missing out on at least $500,000 of uncollected lodgers tax.
That's approximately right. That's just based on the number of people we have paying tax versus the number of people identified in the software program.
And again, it's not so, that's huge, it's a huge number that we're missing out on, but it's more just the bigger issue for me is the lack of enforcement, the people that are doing the right thing versus the ones that aren't, and just to help level that.
Fairness.
Yeah.
So again, there's a couple of extremes here, I think. And where Angel Fire needs to be is somewhere in the middle. And my hope is to provide you guys with whatever information you want and get your input so that the final formulation of something isn't something that's, you know, I mean, if it has to, we can bring it back to council multiple times. But I'm really hoping to bring you something that's gonna pass the first time we bring it up. And the way we're gonna do that is we're gonna need to work together on our way there, on the path to that ordinance.
Right?
Mayor, Rich. Mr. Mayor, Council.
Question for you, Manager Weeks, expectation. I'd say weeks.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was like,
Short being promoted.
Expectations for the council meeting on the 23rd.
Uh-huh.
Right now, we have a request approval to move forward with the ordinance changes for chapter 3,
Yeah.
lodgers tax. Am I to understand that we have another one now, request to move forward for chapter 8, short-term rental?
No, we're gonna remove that from the,
Oh, it's all coming off.
yeah, it's coming up.
It's all coming off?
At this,
That's all I have. Thank you.
Do we have any other discussion right now on?
It seems, it just seems like how many meetings do you have between now and September first? You guys meeting twice a month or once?
Once a month, but we do, and like, we're gonna have a special meeting this week for, La Tamale. Because we didn't have it on the agenda in time. And we're trying to get it passed so that that money can be spent properly. So, I mean, our committee would definitely meet if we, were asked to take a look at a final product for approval.
Well, we're 45 days from September first roughly, and to Mayor Pro Tem Hal's point, we're gonna need at least one more work session on this, it feels like, so. If, you know. Somewhere in, you're gonna have to have a meeting that actually has this on the agenda, not just the tamales, and then we're gonna have a work session.
Yeah, but it sounds like if we're gonna break it into 3 different ordinances,
so just to be clear, it's not 3 ordinances. Really, all we're doing is updating the current lodgers tax to reference the short-term rental. So there needs to be language in the current lodgers tax ordinance that gives authority to the short-term rental ordinance to collect on behalf of the lodgers.
what's the short-term rental?
That's gonna be a new ordinance.
Okay, that's-
Short-term rental, which would be in Title 8, which is, you know, a lot of our compliance stuff.
So it'd be modifying 8 and 3 instead of just 3.
That's right. And then there'll be a resolution, and all the resolution does is define what the fees are. And that's just to pull the fees out of ordinance, because it's a lot easier to update a resolution than it is to update an ordinance.
Okay. Well, I'll be out of town, personally out of town next week, but I'm in the town for the rest of the summer after that.
So one of the things I'd like the council to do is, I don't know how much time you want to invest. Like I say, we have, if you haven't already, we have several ordinances from other municipalities that you can reference and read through, and I think it would be very educational for you to do so. So one of the things is, you know, how much time before we want to get back together? How much time do you need to be able to educate yourself on this and come up with questions and suggestions?
So, and I know you and I have talked about this separately, but I think the occupancy issue is still legally looming large, so how long do we think it's gonna take to get an answer on that? I personally like the way it's addressed in Rio Dosas ordinance. I haven't looked at any of the others, I'll be honest about that, but that to me seems like one of the major sticking points.
So I think that is a good point, Councilman Crane, and I think with these examples, you can look at how different people do it and, you know, it's really gonna be up to you guys, on how to address that.
Are we looking at doing all of this? I understand 3, 8 and fees in one council session, or is some of this further along we could do earlier? And you see what I'm saying?
So the first thing that has to be done is the short-term rental ordinance. Cause it has to be in place before the lodger's tax can reference it. And it has to be in place before we can do a resolution. But I will tell you that, to me, my thought was to do them all in one, at one time, because really the changes to the lodger's tax ordinance are pretty minimal. And if you look at what I handed out, I know I don't have a color printer, so, but I did, it is a red line version of what I handed out. It's just all black and white, but, so the lodger's tax ordinance is pretty minimal on the changes there. The real need of this is in the short-term rental ordinance.
Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Ellen. Moving on to item B, discussion on landscaping tank 7. Manager Weir,
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So, we were asked to discuss this. We, as you all may be aware, we're replacing tank 7. The water, tank, and if you haven't been up there, I do recommend that each of you get with, Director Epler and have him give you a tour and discuss, tank 7. It is, something that is needed. The current tank there was not, number one, too small for the volume, the capacity that we have at peak periods. And secondarily, it's just old and was near the point of failure. And so we needed to put a new tank in. This was started with the prior administration. That we went through the process of obtaining right of way in order to build our not right away, yeah, I guess it is right away. In order to build the new tank, we negotiated that, the prior administration, I'm sorry. Easement, yeah, I know, that was right away, wasn't the right word. Easement to construct that, that was negotiated with the resort. In the prior administration. And now that we started construction on it, there have been concerns from the community about the visibility of the structure and how it might impact not only the local homeowners' enjoyment of the green belt that it's adjacent to, but also potentially even their home values. And in the easement agreement, which Director Epler has a copy of, it does specify, there's language that specifies that we need to do landscaping to try and minimize the impact of the view. Do you want to hand that out?
I've marked the paragraph with an X that's pertinent to the conversation. Relevant, I should say.
We'll need to get it. You go ahead and give that to Rocky. I already got it. So we need to have a conversation about what we want to invest in the process of being in meeting the requirements of the easement. So I think you can see the paragraph there that states that it, you know, the language there that we need to do landscaping to try and restrict the view of that tank. And so I guess that's what we're looking for, guidance from the council, obviously not in today's meeting, this is more educational. But we need guidance from the council on what level and how much of expenditures do we want to go to, and what are you looking for as an end result in this, after understanding what the requirements are for the easement and also understanding the opinion of the local homeowners. And I think we do have some representatives from the community that would like to speak on this issue.
before they speak, I would just point out, and again, I'm totally in favor of concealing utilities. Not only this tank, but anywhere, but for anything beautification, enhancement, enjoyment of the community. But I would point out that the utility easement was made between us and the resort. And so before we determine what we want to do, I think it'd be important to understand what the resort expects of us. Since that's who the agreement was made with. I would put the ball in their court. And we can at least use that as a minimum and expand from there.
Mr. Mayor, I would just say, I think we need to, because the cost to do this could be, you know, significant.
No, That's what I'm saying, again, I understand that, but
So it's our cost.
I understood. That's my point. So before I think we need to get a better understanding of what's expected of us. That we can even have something to put a cost to. This is something you'd like to address the council.
Sure. Thank you guys for letting me speak. The unfortunate situation that happened, that I was part of is I sold the house adjacent to it about 2 weeks before all the work started. So, it, just the way things go. The previous owners, I think, did know about the tank replacement, but because nothing had happened in 3 years, assumed that nothing was gonna happen. And then my people bought the house. It's an over $800,000 house, and then all of a sudden, their view was completely torn up. So I'm at the unfortunate situation here where I'm trying to help them because I'm sick to my stomach that this was, part of the deal. So I think that easement agreement, although it's with the resort, is the responsibility of the village. That was the agreement they made. And so that was to protect the homeowners and the people around the tank. So we also are going from a very small tank that was not in their view, was at the front of that piece of property, to now what is 3 times the size and right in their view line. So just some things that we kind of were trying to get across is, is there a possibility to move that tank forward where the other tank was, even though it's a bigger tank? We also wanted to make sure that other property owners knew what was happening on the other side and around the tank, because we feel like maybe we're the only ones that are kind of alerted to it, because other property owners may not be visiting.
Which, it's the only home,
It is the only home.
the other property owners around are not built out, right? It's.
Right, correct.
There's probably one other house.
Just my point is the other property owners are probably not at those.
Yeah, they're not
unimproved
there,
Lots
right,
being,
on a regular
Yeah.
basis.
I walk the whole property, there's at least 3 other houses that the new tank will be in view of. At least 3.
And it will have an effect whether there's
Yeah.
a house on it or not, the value of the property.
Okay. I'm just saying there's 3 other houses,
Yeah.
Yeah.
not to mention the lots.
The unfortunate situation is that, I think had they known about this, the value would have been different on the house. And so it's nobody's fault, it's just where we're at. So we're asking, to encourage you guys to, help us with that and by doing some landscaping. Considering some berms with trees to take down the effect of that tank. It's also a lot taller tank, I believe, than the previous one. So fencing may not even, which we hope there is some fencing, but that may not take away the ugliness of it. And then also we were hoping that maybe a surveyor could be engaged to let us know exactly, we feel like some of the trees may have been off their property that were cut. And so we're just kind of wanting to make a plan to make that better. And so I'm here in support of that and to help in any way possible to get them, what they thought they were buying into. So.
If I could, Director, certainly there was a survey, a boundary stake at the very least done prior to the construction.
Yes, the staking that's out there is boundaries and work, certain. Yes, the staking that's in existence out there, lines out the boundary of the work, which is essentially the boundary of the easement on the side that this house is on.
To your knowledge, can you tell if there's been any encroachment onto homeowner's property.
There was one area where, now keep in mind that the staking that's there for the boundaries of work isn't necessarily the edge of the easement. Okay, it's essentially, it lines out where the fence is going to be. Okay. There is one place without knowing for sure where the property corners are. For these people's property, there is one stump there that looks like it could be relatively close. But all signs indicate that it was a dead tree. And one of sufficient size to where if it did fall, it would hit the tank or the house.
And
But
then,
until get the actual lot line, verified, it's close.
and let me ask you this, well, is the fence, is it necessary for security purposes?
It is a requirement,
It is
yes.
a requirement, I don't know if that would just add to the blight versus. If there's any alternatives there, there is a security requirement.
It is a security requirement, but there are options of other styles of fence that may be more appealing.
I think we should look at that
Absolutely.
before we erect anything.
Okay, now, understanding that the subcontractor for the fencing has already been picked and established. So we would need to first see if what options they would have. If not, then there would be a process for final construction to find another subcontractor if it's a style of fence that's picked other than what this
You
contract.
know what they have, what's currently planned to go in,
Chain link fence, basic chain link fence.
no. Security fence at the top or anything as far as.
It doesn't
Just
show,
basic chain link
it's
fence.
basic chain link fence is what the plan detail shows.
How tall?
6 feet.
And the survey we have in hand is the current proposed location for, it's gonna fence off both the existing tank and the new tank.
Yes,
And my understanding is there's a reason we opted to keep the existing tank and add this behind. I'm not sure I know what the reason was. In other words, one of the things that Ms. Sutton said before you was, could we get rid of the old tank and move this tank closer to the road? But what was the reason we opted to keep the existing tank and add this one behind? Just build
well,
capacity.
the existing tank needed to stay in operation while the new one was being built.
Got it.
The option of identifying the location, identifying where the new tank should be is at a lower elevation with the existing contour, means that the area would be built up to set the tank on. With the terrain, had it been chosen to put the new tank up above, then the tank would have had to sit in the hole. Cause basically the bottom elevations of the tanks need to remain the same.
Right.
As pressure zones are set, so forth and so on. So really the option was to put it in the location that it is right now. As far as moving the tank to a different location at this point, might be a little difficult. The new tank is built.
Got it.
And they are planning to remove the existing tank once
Yes.
the new tank is in effect.
Yes.
It's not safe.
But if you took that tank out now, you're gonna leave a bunch of people without
Well,
water.
yeah, it's just not.
It's not possible to take the old tank out and use that area. I mean,
That thing has to stay online until the new one's prepared to take over.
got it.
Yeah, and there's actually a process when we're switching from the old tank to the new tank to one, not only ensure that people are not interrupted with water service that we follow, but also mainly that we follow disinfecting procedures to make sure we don't contaminate the line with anything from the new tank.
So the tank has to go where it is on this drawing. There's no moving the tank. I mean, for $10 million, we could probably move the tank, but realistically, that tank's gotta go where it's shown on this survey. Changing the fence is gonna be substantially easier than changing any of the tank layouts at this point.
Yes.
And this easement agreement, and everything, it was done over almost exactly 2 years ago. We're about a week away.
Now have discussed the option with the engineer of changing the fence alignment to allow, as far as we can, to allow for berming and tree planting in between the property line and the fence. I will say it'll be a pretty minimal move. Cause there are factors, we can't put the fence right next to the tank, so forth and so on. But where the fence is at its closest point, to this home, we do see an opportunity, to move it some. Understanding that the tank is built up on a pad. And that if we move the fence the closer we move it to the tank, the higher the fence is gonna be, because it'll be up on the fill slope of this fill area, thus making it even more visible. We just need to look at our options. I did also speak with him about, how we would move forward with, engaging a contractor and getting design for this landscaping. And there is a method to use the funding we have in place, which there's a fairly decent contingency on there. There's money to do some good work. But as opposed to doing it as a change order with file construction, we can still, with the engineer's help, work with the landscaping company directly. And the engineer would essentially be handling the paperwork to pay for it out of this fund. So we wouldn't be paying extra and going through a change order process with file construction.
Do we have any order of magnitude of the cost of the berming, fencing and landscaping we're talking about, or?
Not at all. We have no scope of work. That's something would love to have input on. You know, I think I'm stating the obvious when I'm saying that any landscaping plan that we come up with is not going to achieve immediate concealment.
For sure.
It'll need time to grow. So the discussion needs to be had, I think, and we'll have to make the decision on fencing relatively quick, because we're getting pretty close to the no turning back point with the subcontractor. If it ends up that we have to, they have to, that we need to find another subcontractor for the fencing. As far as the extent of the work for landscaping, before reaching out to any landscapers, I wanted to make sure that it was understood that the likelihood of coming up with a landscaping plan that was going to completely conceal it from day one is unrealistic. Wanted to make sure that was understood.
Would we even attempt the landscaping this fall, or is this a spring plant because of the planting and the growing season? Is this spring no matter how we slice it?
It's my understanding that transplanting of trees at this time of year never is very successful. That it's better in the spring as trees are still somewhat dormant to transplant them then. But here again, this is opinion. This is something may find that once we do speak with landscaping contractor, they may know better.
When's the construction on the tank scheduled to be completed?
Full complete schedule is scheduled for the completion first week of November. They are way ahead of schedule. If you allow me, I'll grab the there's an important milestone when we were talking about switching from the old tank to the new tank. That's slated to be second week of September is where they project to switch from the old tank to the new tank, put it in service and start demo of the old tank. In our last construction update meeting and telling us where they're at on as far as being ahead of schedule, they feel that there's potential that could come second week of August as opposed to second week of December or September.
I mean, do you have an idea of what is the total footage we're talking about if we need to be?
Total footage
Yeah.
of landscaping,
Yes.
I would say it's probably 4,000 to 5,000 square feet.
I personally don't like chain link fences. I don't
No,
think they're
that's
very aesthetic.
Too bad we don't go by. It's in that kind.
I'd like to see what are the other options of fencing that could be out there.
I think that's the first thing we need to look at before they get it ordered and in, especially if they're ahead of schedule.
Yeah, Now, the thing is, on current schedule, installation of the fencing is not scheduled until the first week of October. Okay, the issue in the short term, though, is we'll soon reach a point where could create some issues trying to essentially, if it ends up that this subcontractor can't do the new style of fencing. You know, we have to establish that right away.
I'm assuming that this didn't go through the architectural control committee, because Jake would have never allowed a chain link.
Yeah, we just said, no, you can't have a chain link fence.
And I guess,
And you said I'm a government entity. I'm
We
saying.
can take the fencing down around water department. Other side,
That's out there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we're in the
Resort bound.
But Mr. Mayor, I will say, because I said the same thing, I said that chain link fencing, I said it depends on which subdivision you're in. And I quickly was informed and learned that it's throughout the village, chain link fencing is not allowed. It's throughout the village.
throughout the village too. And I guess the idea would be to have the fence up the same elevation as the tank pad.
Well,
More so than-
we talked about that scenario, but understanding it's gonna be as much, if not more visible than that. We talked about potentially the option of having a more decorative, taller fence where the road around the tank starts to fall off onto the slope. We would, you know, it could do more to mask the tank, but then we're looking at more fence.
See, and I think, yeah, you stick that fence down in that hole and get it as low as you can and you burn in front of it. Trees on top of it.
I don't.
Depends on whether you want to look at fence or look at tank.
Well, if you have, like he was saying, if I understand, if you had the fence closer to the tank,
Yep,
then you have trees in front of that fence.
right,
You know, more hiding that fence
Right.
with a fence shielding more of the tank. Which would probably be more aesthetically
Now,
pleasing.
when they mature, they're going to not only hide the tank, but hide a lot of fencing too.
yeah. How many tanks do we have total?
14.
And how many will we need to add over the coming decade?
2 at least.
Replace.
So whatever solution we spend with zeros on it, if we're gonna do it for one tank, we better be prepared to do it for the rest.
Well, probably not all tanks, but I'm sure there are a few that would need to be.
Well, I think if it's a situation where we have to get an easement, that was designated as green belt and specified in the easement that we need to do so. I think so.
But some of the other tank locations are owned, they're not easements, so we wouldn't have to.
Tank 8, for instance, is a relatively small tank, just like 7 was. I know at one time there was a lot right next door to it that was for sale. I know the guy that had it. I'm gonna reach out to him and see if he still has it. Think it to the future. We may wanna buy it because 8 would be my next choice. To replace. I would ask, you know, try to, dabble into past experience with some of y'all that have been with the village or involved in some way in a while. The last time the village constructed a new building, did they have to take the plans and everything before architectural control committee with AFCO?
Depends on where it was.
And in my experience on there, and I haven't been on for a few years now, but I never saw anything from the village.
No, none of the pump stations, none of it.
The reason why I ask, and this is something I think that could be researched, is if in by chance in the water and sewer transfer agreement. And the whole annexation in of the rest of the village, if there was ever anything within that agreement that says that the village of Angel Fire is not subject to the AFCO's jurisdiction.
But it states in here, AFR hereby warrants and. No, I thought maybe it was addressed in here. It says covenants. But it doesn't specifically say.
Ordinance we refer back to. Because we have ordinances.
Right.
You have
AFCO has covenants.
You know, and I'm not saying that I want chain link fence either, but I think there could be a remote possibility that the village may be exempt from.
And let's see what other options They're even available though.
Yeah.
It may be, that it may, because I don't know, again. A bigger, more solid, I mean, if this becomes more structured. that-
Well, what I think I've seen most commonly in other municipalities is chain link fence with that plastic netting. You know what I mean, jammed in between the slats. I don't think anybody wants that either, you know? But it's not gonna be wrought iron, it'd be a $500,000 fence, so.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, the idea would probably be, would need to be like a solid, almost a solid
Panel.
panel.
I do wanna add, as a manager, where it invited any of y'all to go up and go with me and look at the project, any information you'd need, be happy to do it. If you do happen to go up there on your own, I wanna mention that you look on the side that's facing the house, you'll see a relatively steep slope. Okay, this is, it meets all the requirements for the engineered field that the tank sits on. In the plans, it shows a finished slope of a much more gradual grade. We will be, we have excess scrap material that File Construction is going to haul up there to make that whole slope more gradual. I'm hoping that it can be as flat as a 5-to-1. Well, if we could achieve 6-to-1, judging from the plans which I have that are not scalable, I'm estimating that they had drawn in about a 5-to-1 slope, which is pretty flat, which will help things grow. Things will grow on it better, but also there's a quick enough gain in elevation that whatever trees are planted up on the top are gonna grow and conceal that pretty quick.
Sutton?
I was just wondering, what color is the tank that's gonna come in?
It's all for the green, so it's real dark green. Probably the color the old tank was before it faded.
Yeah, it's kind of, and then I'm just wondering if there is a plan in place that my clients can look at to see what's proposed, what's coming up, like, is there a drawing of sort that for the tank replacement and
The whole
the
project.
whole project, yeah,
Then to include landscaping.
yeah.
I don't have anything drawn up yet, for landscaping, but I have a set of plans that show the.
Like with the height of the tank and all of that.
Yeah,
Okay, that would be helpful.
and again, the tank is erected right now.
Yeah.
So as far as getting what was difficult before is to try to get the perception of what the tank was going to appear like from the elevation of the house.
Right.
Well, the tank's up now and you can really get that perception.
Oh, the tank is
There, yeah.
built, but it's not up there.
No, it's on, they build it on site.
Oh,
The
okay.
tank's built on the site right now.
Okay, I'll take a drive up there. I don't think my clients have been back since. So.
Well, I will take it upon myself to have a conversation with the resort. To just get their expectations from us. For this utility easement agreement. To at least set a basis for a minimum. And then. Director Upper is gonna get us some alternative. Fencing options in the meantime.
Do you mention to them also that, if that requirement is through APCO for no chain link fence? That I find it hard to believe that they would allow something.
I am gonna bring that up and to Kurt's point, I wanna see if there's any exemptions. Like you said, it might be in the transfer agreement. But I'm sure the attorneys can answer that. Their attorneys can answer that pretty quickly.
Thank you.
So I will. And you can fine them for not submitting an application.
We can't, we'll just lean the village property, we're gonna be finding a building.
Okay. Anything else, Lisa or counselors? Okay, with that, let's move on to item C, discussion on holiday pay compensation. Amanda Weir.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, this is an issue that, literally is just, I was made aware of just weeks ago. So our current ordinance says that when staff works on a holiday, that they're only allowed 8 hours of pay for that holiday. That's, as I recall it being, even back into when I started in 2015. The prior administration started a practice specific to the police force that allowed the people on the police force to get compensated for the number of hours that they were scheduled. And our policemen basically were working 10-hour days. And so the policemen were getting 10 hours of compensation for a holiday versus everybody else was only getting 8 hours. And we do have other employees, it's beyond the police, that work in excess of an 8-hour day. If we were all worked 8-hour days, this would not be an issue. But we don't, we have different schedules. For example, unfortunately, I'd asked Chief Britnell to attend, but he is having to deal with our pharmacy visit right now and couldn't attend. Our pharmacist visit. And but his staff, they work, basically 24-hour shifts or different variations of 24-hour shifts, but 24 hours on a holiday. They have no expectation to get paid for 24 hours of holiday pay. And they never have, they've always gotten 8. There are other employees that do work 4/10s. And previously, when I was here, even the finance department worked 4/10s. And it may be something we want to do again in the future. So when I saw this, instead of me doing what was done previously by the previous village manager and just saying, you guys want this? Okay, I'll do it. Even though the ordinance, this is an ordinance that says, and I handed it out to you, it says that you only get paid for 8 hours, but for over a year, our police force has been getting paid in excess of what the ordinance allows. So what I want to do is correct this, but I want to make sure that I want this to end up being a council decision. It's not really a decision, in my opinion, for a manager to make unilaterally. So I will tell you that there is some language that I like that I worked on with Chief Hogriff. And it basically, if you read the ordinance where it says, the village approved holidays worked by receiving compensatory time off at a rate of 1 times the actual holiday time worked up to a maximum of 8 hours per day.
Says per holiday, but yeah.
Yeah, per holiday. I'm sorry. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
I would like to change that. My recommendation is to change that up to 10 hours per holiday. Because it's very rare, other than the fire department, for anybody to be scheduled more than 10 hours. I will tell you that we have other examples from other municipalities where they say, it even says you get paid whatever you actually worked. You get paid that number of hours of holiday pay. So if somebody worked 24 hours on a holiday, they get paid. You get paid the 24 you worked, and you get paid 24 more for the holiday. The Fair Labor Standard Act only requires 8 hours, but it doesn't prevent us from paying more. So this is something, again, I'm not looking for an answer today, but I want you to think about it. I will tell you, I don't know what the impact on this is gonna be on the budget. When I did my calculations for the budget, I did not take this into consideration, so. You know, we're gonna be slightly under budgeted in the police force for sure. If we allow the police force to do this, but my recommendation is not to do it for a department, but to do it for the entire village, whatever the answer is. And but I do think it's something we need to consider, and again, I am looking for feedback from the council. And to point me in the right direction of what you'd like to see. We are in the throes of rewriting our chapter 2, our employment ordinance in its entirety. There's a lot of issues with it. I think we've butted heads with a few of those issues recently. And it is being totally rewritten, by the way, at the full cost of the municipal league. Our ordinance was so bad that the municipal league agreed to pay to have it rewritten. So what I need is direction from the council to say, to go to the person that's rewriting our ordinance on behalf of the municipal league. And say, this is what we want this to read in this section. And then we will be bringing, hopefully, again, no later than the first part of August, a new ordinance for Title II to the council. But I'm not sure how you guys feel like this should be dealt with. I can tell you that, again, the policemen feel like if I'm supposed to, you know, they're working 410s, so that day was they were supposed to work 10 hours and it's a holiday. They should get 10 hours of compensation. That's their opinion. From the fire chief, he didn't seem like 8 hours was fine. They all understood the rule. That's the way it was. We have other staff that are working 10-hour days and that have expressed, they feel like that basically if the police are getting it, we should get it too. And I halted, beginning, well, you know, right after I was made aware of this, I halted the police. They're having to comply with the ordinance with which our police chief fully agreed with. That if it's in ordinance, we have to comply with that. So right now, the police were used to getting 10 hours on holidays because they work 410s. And as of this pay period, which included the 4th of July, of course, they were only getting compensated for 8 hours because that's what the ordinance said. But I do think that we could increase that up to 10 hours and it would take care of most of our staff.
If we moved it to 12. Would that
You
be-
could certainly move it to 12. You know, again, it's gonna have some impact on the budget. It's not gonna be a budget buster by any means.
I just know in our community too, if we definitely want to encourage, especially our first responders on the holidays, because those are typically our busiest times of year too. And, you know, it's hard to work on a holiday, but I do think personally, if you're working on a holiday, I would want to be compensated for the time I've spent. So 10, 12, I mean, I'm just throwing this out there too.
And that's per day,
Per holiday.
Or
per
holiday.
holiday.
If they work like on the July 4th. You know, we just went over our list of holidays. So if they're working Juneteenth and July 4th, they're getting paid.
And then if there's events, like the village is hosting events, we can also get some funding elsewhere for the.
So if you're talking about events and we have staff working like and the general fund gets reimbursed by lodger's tax. They wouldn't get reimbursed for holiday pay. They would only get reimbursed for hours
For
worked.
regular time.
But then, but yeah, but
Well,
that's
maybe
still,
overtime, but
Well, I think I can put these two together for you guys. Because we have events on July 4th,
yeah.
can lodger's tax pay the overtime?
So lodger's tax can pay for the time actually worked, yes, but not the holiday pay.
Not the holidays.
yeah.
But for instance, if Director Epler is in a snowplow truck on New Year's Day and he's in it for 10 hours, right now he can only get paid for 8.
So there is different language for salaried employees and they're only allowed 8 hours. That's,
Well, let's use let's use his department.
This is for hours
His workers.
hourly staff only.
I understand, so if he has somebody out in a plow truck on New Year's Day, and they need to be plowing for 10 hours that day, they're capped out at 8, the way this.
For
reads.
holiday
For
pay, they're
holiday.
currently capped out at 8.
So the choice is move it to a higher number, or just move it to hours worked as hours paid.
Or leave it at 8, but they only get paid for 8. As it's currently written.
I was wondering too, like those departments, I mean. This is where, I'm just trying to think how his department would be different, where they would get their hourly and overtime just period, and the holidays would be a factor in that.
It's really no different. If, it depends on how you look at it. If you say the hours they work on a holiday, they get holiday pay for that. Then it's really no different depending on which department you have. The only difference is what they're scheduled. In the fire department, you know,
It can be a 24-hour shift.
really currently nobody's scheduled more than 10-hour shifts except the fire department.
So then the reason the cap would only be capping the fire department.
It would be capping the fire department right now. Now, I will tell you, there has been talk, and it doesn't look like we're headed down that path, but there has been talk about going to longer shifts in the police department. And if we do it someday in the future, decide to go down that route, then we would have to probably want to readdress this. But, you know, another perspective, even though the chief doesn't feel like it's a big issue with the fire department. I mean, if you want to look at this from what's fair, they're gonna spend a holiday away from their family working for us, should they get compensated for that?
Yes.
So we should just, I mean, I think the consensus is to consider hours worked.
Yeah, and so I wanna bring
No,
this, I think this is something you guys need to decide. It's gonna be wrapped into a rewrite of the employee ordinance. But to me, this is something that's gonna stand out. It affects people's pay, it affects our budgets. And I'm just looking for direction. To me, it seems like the 10-hour would make most people happy, but again, there's a question, is that what's fair, and is that what the council wants to do?
I don't know.
But it seems to like the 10-hour would be definitely more fair than what we got in place now. I don't know how going to the 12 would impact it, but,
So how would you feel? How would you feel about it? It's just, it's hours worked, holiday hours worked.
Cause I mean, it's usually not over 12.
That
right?
covers everybody.
that's the fairest thing you could throw
The
at it.
the fire department's gonna go from 8 to 24. That's gonna be the big impact in that decision. But again, they're working on a holiday.
From an accounting standpoint, it's a lot easier.
Well, from a payroll perspective, it's not gonna be that big of a deal because you manually enter your hours anyhow. It's actually might make it easier, because right now, they have to put in on one day 8 hours of holiday pay, and then they have to, you know, put in the 16 hours or whatever work hours. And if they forget to do that, we have to reject it and send it back and say, no, enter it correct. And so they gotta remember to enter that separately.
If it's just hours.
If they
worked,
just had one entry of 24 hours, it might actually administratively
Or
be a
8
little
or
bit
12 or
easier.
10,
Yeah.
whatever the case may be.
And would that impact the budget drastically more than going to 10 or 12 hours?
Well, so it's gonna impact the fire station budget if y'all do that more than anybody. And the fire station budget is probably the most aggressive budget, even though I think Chief Britnell would argue because he asked for a lot more money than we gave him. But if you look at the fire station budget, it is a comparatively a relatively aggressive budget financially. But it is gonna impact it. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact percentages, but I can get them for you. If you guys wanna give me a couple of numbers, we can go look and see what the cost would be. You know,
A question, snowplow drivers in the middle of a storm, what's the average number of hours they would work.
Average or maximum? What would be
Maximum,
maximum?
yeah.
Maximum could be 12, but on average, it was 8 to 9 hours.
Okay,
Simply because in situations where, you know, it had a storm where we knew we had a couple of days
right.
going, even though we would get everything open, still a process going out and widening roads. And found that when the 12-hour day happened, the day after wasn't as productive as it could be. So I.
So it's not unusual to ask those guys to work a lot of hours.
No.
Not in the winter.
Yeah, if there's a storm,
Yeah.
they're there.
Well, there's a lot of holidays to dodge there too, right? New Year's Day, President's Day.
And that's what I need the most.
Right,
Well, the hours worked, in my opinion, is the fairest way. to go.
I would certainly support that.
Now, you might wanna do a couple of scenarios if you could, if this was.
Hours worked versus a 12-hour, and again, that's
Yes.
gonna affect more of the fire department budget.
Yeah,
I'll run those numbers and get back to you.
okay.
I'm good.
All right, anything further? This meeting is adjourned.